Transhumanism.
Chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the next edition of the geopolitical podcast, DieGutenMenschen, Public Enemies of the Deep State. My name is still Manuel Ochsenreiter. I am editor-in-chief of the German news magazine Zuerst. And again, I am talking to my friend and colleague Mateusz Piskorski from Poland. Hello, Mateusz.
Hello. As usual, you are talking to the same guy, so nothing has changed. In our podcast, at least, yes.
Yes. There are some stable things, and one of the stable things is this podcast.
Yes.
In a world of chaos.
As well as the tensions between Poland and some other countries. This is also quite stable.
What are the news from the front lines? Please tell us. Are there news?
Well, the Bhutanese have sent their air force, and that's why I think that everything is finished. You hear the shots now.
Yes.
And the dogs barking all around. Which means that the front line is over. We are trying to escape the Czechs and the Bhutanese.
We are with you with all our hearts and our minds. You know that.
That's great, because we are really under attack and pressure.
Yes. The Czech army, they are as successful as the French army, they say.
Yes, they have a long history in opposing the Polish troops and German troops as well.
Oh, am I allowed to make a war joke here in this podcast, or you think I'm going too far?
Well, I don't. Manuel, I think that you should first read the newest article of President Vladimir Putin and then give your opinions about that.
I will do this, but I have to ask you, how many soldiers you need to defend Paris?
Well, to defend Paris?
Yes. How many soldiers do you need to defend Paris?
What do you mean,
the French capital?
French?
The French capital. Yes. How many French soldiers you need?
Yes, I have heard about Paris. How many French soldiers? Well, yes. I guess several millions of soldiers.
Nobody knows, because no one ever tried.
That's a good joke. Typically German.
Yes. Of course it is. I think it's a joke which is not so often told within French families. But still, so we speak today about a serious topic. We speak today about biopolitics. Mateusz, can you explain what biopolitics or biopolitics? What does it mean? What is behind the term?
Well, first, I think that the notion of biopolitics has quite different meanings, but first let's explain to our listeners why we are talking about that. I mean, have you heard about the situation in Ukraine where they sell the infants which are born of surrogate mothers?
You mean in Ukraine they sell babies?
Yes, they sell babies which are born in surrogate families for some rich and very often quite elderly pairs from the West.
So from Europe and US, or?
Yes, exactly, from Western Europe, exactly, but sometimes also by some rich families from South America and so on. Because we had lately some news from Ukraine, which seems to be a completely failed state, by all means, economically, politically, socially, morally, ethically, and so on. And Ukraine is selling the last, let's say, precious resource they have. They are selling their people. I mean, they are selling their people as a cheap workforce.
Yeah.
for the West as well, and they are also selling the babies.
So I understood really right. Kiev is looking at the weakest part of its people as an export product.
Exactly, it's a new kind of export product. I mean, before they used to have some industry, agriculture, and so on, and
they sold out everything. They sold out their land with land grabbing. They sold out their workers by migration to Europe. But
by the way, they are often. I mean, those Ukrainians who are opposed to the present government of Ukraine and its neoliberal policy. Not only the present government actually, but also the previous president Poroshenko, who started all that after the coup d'etat in 2014, often tell that now Ukraine has to implement the new International Monetary Fund plan, and the conditions of this plan are quite similar to another plan, a historical plan which you might know, Generalplan Ost.
Never heard about that. No, of course. Yeah, but it's a German reflex.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Anyway, biopolitics by contemporary Ukrainian authorities is quite primitive and vulgar. I mean, it's about just selling the human bodies, be it people who are, let's say, half slaves, working somewhere in the West, or the infants who are born by surrogate mothers in Ukraine, young women in Ukraine. So these are two possibilities to sell human body, to treat human body as a natural resource you may sell everywhere. Yes.
So how do we have to imagine that there are, as you said, elderly couples? If I look at Germany, it is like if you are not a young couple, if you don't have, for example, the square meters for living and so on, you cannot adopt a child in Germany. The regulations are very hard. So these people, as you said, the elderly couples and so on, they go to an agency or they go in the internet and then they order a baby from Ukraine. Is that how I have to imagine it?
Yes, they order a baby, but using surrogate mothers, which means that they give their cells to a Ukrainian woman, and the Ukrainian woman gives birth to a child which is genetically at least half, let's say, foreign.
So before buying the baby, they enslave the Ukrainian mother. So
yes, and it is a business of quite influential companies. I mean, Ukraine is the only country in Europe which has such liberal law when it comes to the regulations about taking the children, exporting the children, and so on. Yes, so this is a very vulgar and primitive notion of biopolitics when it comes to Ukraine, but of course the whole term is definitely more sophisticated. Yes,
yes, of course. But
it is the term which comes back nowadays as we have the pandemics, the coronavirus, and so on. It is somehow connected before with the lectures which were given in Sorbonne in Paris by Michel Foucault. He was the philosopher who invented the whole notion. Then I think you had also in Germany one contemporary philosopher who was writing a lot about it. It was Peter Sloterdijk.
Sloterdijk, yes. Yeah.
Yes. So he was also writing about it. And of course, to some extent, the whole notion of biopolitics is connected or interconnected with the idea of transhumanism.
Yes.
Anyway, I think that the whole situation with coronavirus, whole situation with pandemics will only accelerate some processes, some civilizational processes which seem to go in the direction of biopolitics, of let's say interpreting the value of human being from the purely biological point of view, and by treating human bodies as a kind of, let's say, economic product, yes?
Yes, and of course there are, like with any product, like with cars, like with fridges, like with TVs, there are different quality standards for these products. I think this is what we might have in the future too with human bodies, if that is going on like this. So maybe the child which is immune against the COVID-19 virus is a little bit more expensive or has more value than the child you order without the immunity. Can that be?
Of course. So this is a kind of continuation of the idea of eugenics, yes, which was used some time ago in different countries. I'm not talking here about Germany and its experience with that.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, as usual. But I'm rather talking about the, let's say, ideas of eugenics used in such countries as United States in the past, or Sweden. Sweden actually was one of the last countries in European Union, in Europe as a whole, which used that idea for, let's say, for the reason of shaping of its society and of the genome of the whole society. So I think this is a, let's say, very, very new aspect of geopolitical rivalry between different countries and different centers of power. Because I mean, of course, you can compete on different levels, on the military one, on the level of ideas and so on the level of economy, of course. But I think that the future will bring us also a competition between different centers of power, between different geopolitical poles in terms of biopolitics, which means that all will try to produce the technologies, the know-how to produce a new man.
But this will have to do a lot with the regional laws and, of course, also the regional complex of culture, civilization, religion, tradition, if a region will permit such activities or if they won't permit. We had it, by the way, I mean, it doesn't lead too far away from the topic, but we had it within Europe when it comes to euthanasia, when it comes to is someone allowed to end his life, what we call generally euthanasie in German, or euthanasie, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, so that there was a tourism, for example, going to Switzerland to do that, or before in the 1960s and 70s when abortion was banned in West Germany, a lot of people from Germany, they went to Netherlands where it was not forbidden. So do you think that we will see such kind of tourism, such kind of power poles, different power poles in their relation to biopolitics also?
We already see that. I mean, the question is now, the very, very important questions are about how to adjust to such a reality. On the one hand, you will have, let's say, traditional morality and traditional values. On the other hand, and on the other side, you will have the newest technologies when it comes to biopolitics. And in the context of geopolitical competition, of course, the, let's say, traditionalist geopolitical powers or superpowers will have somehow to answer and to react to those, let's say, postmodernist geopolitical powers, which will be using or even abusing biopolitics as an instrument of warfare in the future. This is the main and basic question. I mean, how to react, because, for instance, the idea of multipolar world is to a large extent based on the idea of preserving some traditionalist poles in this world, yes? As you have told, several of these poles have values which are interconnected to religions, to civilizations which do not accept any kinds of biopolitical activities of a state, yes? But what should we do? I mean, or what should do the traditionalist geopolitical poles to answer within the geopolitical competitions those who are not adhering to traditionalist values and those who are and who will be using biopolitics as an instrument? What do you think?
Yes, I mean that is it's a very good and basic question, but one of the foundations of this question, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the basic thoughts of this question is that biopolitics will lead to a more progressive or maybe a better quality human. I don't believe that. I wouldn't even outline that the traditionalist societies are at the end the winners, because what is done on the level of science and modification might lead into a disaster. Just to mention some things like GMO in agriculture, different types of pesticide and so on, which were celebrated some decades ago as the big thing which is about to come, or maybe even nuclear power, where everyone was convinced several decades ago or 50 years ago that this will lead into the better world and this will lead in the more progressive world and the more safe world. And we were seeing some tremendous disasters around it. And I strongly believe that this transhumanism and what is today celebrated in the same way as the people celebrated genetical modifications when it comes to agriculture maybe 30, 40 years ago, that we will face some developments we seriously don't want to see. So this is what I believe, that at the end, the societies which are not necessarily, we are not speaking about joining biopolitics or not joining. I think we speak about countless shades of gray between, and indeed there is a huge difference if you can, by a genetical modification, for example, I'm now not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, but if by a genetical modification you can easily, for example, outline cancer development, if you can do that, for example, then it might make quite sense. The question is more, where is the limit of these modifications? And I believe that these liberal, so-called progressive societies will not find any kind of limit, and that they will face a disaster, while those who are dealing with it in a smart and in a wise way, knowing that this is a very dangerous thing they are not playing with, but they are using, that they will be the winners at the end. And this will be more or less the more traditionalist societies. That is what I believe. And maybe it's not a very satisfying answer for you, right?
No, I would just wonder, what would you do if a country which will have no limits, no moral limits, no other limits when it comes to biopolitics, would, for instance, produce, and there are some ideas about that already, I have heard, produce genetically or by using some means of artificial intelligence, produce a new kind of man, let's say a Superman, which would have far more intellectual capabilities than an ordinary man in a traditional society, yes? Because, well, you have mentioned, for instance, the things connected to, let's say, the positive side of modern technologies, including the biotechnologies like fighting cancer or other diseases, of course. But every of those technologies have and has, let's say, a potential to be used for also for other means. Yes. So without, let's say, moral, civilizational, cultural, religious restraints, it might be used for any other means. So the question is more about the idea, the thoughts, how to counter it, let's say, even globally. And what comes to my mind, I don't know if you would agree, is that all those technologies, as we perfectly know, are first and foremost promoted in the neoliberal capitalist world, which means that it will not be the states which control all those technologies, but I think it would be rather corporations, multinational corporations, yes? Mm-hmm. And this brings us to an idea that only opposing and showing the dangers springing out of neoliberal capitalism worldwide could somehow prevent such technologies from being used by the states. If you would agree with me, I mean,
yeah,
this is a danger. I mean, for instance, if there will be a kind of, let's say, some people will try to create a new kind of humans and so on. It will be a technology and a proposition coming from biopolitics, proposed for a large amount of money, only for the richest, of course, yes, to improve their genome, for instance. So only the rich will have the access to that, not the whole Western societies, not the whole most modern or postmodern societies, but only the richest ones, yes. So I think that the only way to prevent this is to somehow fight, or at least warn against the consequences of neoliberal capitalism, which might lead to another, let's say, class warfare between, for instance, those who are genetically modified and who are transhumans, let's say, and all the others, all the majority, which will still have the limitations of an ordinary human body. So I guess that what we should do, I mean, or all the traditionalists should do, is to show that this is an element of capitalist neoliberal logic, which is a danger for everyone, not only for the traditionalist countries or traditionalist civilizations, but also from the majority of the societies of the West. What do you think about it?
Absolutely, yes. And in this dystopia you are picturing here about like breeding the super intelligent human, the first people who will have a problem with this new transhuman will be not the traditionalist societies abroad. That will be the local Western society, because this will be these will be the first humans which will be enslaved by the transhuman. So that is what I strongly believe. So before it becomes a problem for all the others, it will be indeed a problem in the West. And you very correctly mentioned that it will be a thing of corporates. Anyway, I believe that maybe in 20, 30 years, as we see now already with the corruption scandals and the scandals about corporates consulting governments and so on, it will be more or less openly shown that even whole states might be owned by the liberal corporate society. But I think that all these old receipts against globalism, and these are not just economical receipts, these are also cultural receipts, and these are also in traditional terms receipts of a worldwide diversity, for example. I think that is also the right way to answer on this, to stop liberal globalism. And I think we are on a good path. I think we spoke many podcasts ago when it came to the coronavirus and how the coronavirus spread. You know, we did these two podcasts about pandemics and geopolitics, that the afterburner for the coronavirus right now is indeed globalism. And if we see, for example, where in what groups the coronavirus was spreading, where are the super spreaders, and these were, the parties of the not so poor, rich liberal Westerners, or luxury ski resorts and so on, where it came from. So I think indeed these are the old receipts, the old geopolitical receipts against globalism, against the worldwide free market without any limits, which could be an answer. But again, if this super transhuman comes in this dystopia, the first people to fight against him, this will be the people who live with him and around him, because they will be for sure enslaved. And I'm totally convinced this will be the first step of this transhuman. What do you think?
Yes, exactly. But on the other hand, we have begun our discussion from the Ukrainian example, yes, and unfortunately, although people are being turned to slaves there in Ukraine, and people are being traded and sold abroad. Actually, I don't know if you have noticed, for instance, some weeks ago, United Kingdom has ordered several hundreds of Ukrainians, of course, as Gastarbeiter, asking for it the Ukrainian government, and there were some charter flights flying from Ukraine to United Kingdom as well to other countries. But this is a very weird situation when a country on a state level asks another country to export and to sell some human resource. Yes,
that is what West Germany is doing since the 1950s. Yeah, but I know what you mean exactly.
But you are not, as far as I know, this is another topic, of course, but you told me once that, you are not asking, but you are asked to take some immigrants, and that's the difference, yes?
Yes. But before, I mean, that is what's the Turkish case. The Turkish case was clearly, but I don't want to lead now too far away from the topic. But before, the German industry had the choice to invest and to modernize, or to order cheap labor. And what happened was that with the help of the state, they ordered cheap labor from Italy, from Portugal, from Spain. And that was done, as far as I know, also via governments. So back then already the human was seen as an export product. The problem was simply later on to see that the human doesn't behave like a product, you know. So it developed its own dynamics, and this is what I mean. So to come back to the biopolitics topics, that this includes a dynamite and a dynamics we cannot even right now imagine. And I am convinced that those who are the pioneers in this, and who are maybe today celebrating themselves for having all these ideas without any limits of culture, morality, of ethics, that they will wake up in a dystopic nightmare. I'm totally convinced.
Yes, but I'm more pessimistic looking at the Ukrainian reaction of what is going on there. I haven't seen any protests in Ukraine, concerning the things which are happening now, which means selling the people, selling the babies, and so on. Nothing is going on in the streets of Ukraine. That's the problem, and that's why I'm more pessimistic. But anyway, I hope you are right.
But I think when we speak about Ukraine, we have also to see the special situation there. These people are empty. They are literally empty. Even those who went on the streets in 2013, 2014, what for they went on the streets? It was against corruption. It was for better jobs. It was for a pensioner system, which deserves at least the name of a pension system. For all these things, and everything, literally everything became worse with their victory. Yeah, I mean, they won in 2014. They made it, and what they got for it was, in any terms, more more disastrous than the things they had before. I think these people are so empty now. They are so also mentally finished. You very, very correctly called Ukraine a failed state. I think that is exactly how we can call it. I think the people there, they are also, the majority is not really anymore interested really what is going on in Kiev. I mean, they elected a comedian as a president. Yeah? That tells a lot about the society when they say we vote now for someone who is at least not rooted in the old elite. Maybe he's doing something now different. I think it's a very special situation. This is why I'm not so discouraged. And we shouldn't forget something else. I am not sure also, I mean, for me, this whole topic about this ordering babies from Ukraine was now really quite new. We spoke about it before this podcast, yes, and I was reading a bit. But there is no critical publicity, neither in Europe nor in Ukraine, about this thing, because I think that too many people are also right now earning good money with it. But I think that would be, for alternative media, a very interesting and a very important topic, and we should encourage our friends to make something about that.
Because you know the let's say politically correct mainstream media are now talking about the history of slavery in the Western world, and no one has even noticed that there is a kind of modern slavery in countries such as Ukraine at the moment being.
And in this business, and we should this mention very clear, the moralical disaster is not the Ukrainian woman who feels forced to do that. The moralical disaster is the elderly, rich, liberal Western family ordering and buying a baby, a human being, and enslaving someone else, maybe 2,000-3,000 kilometers away for that. Very convenient. You don't see the person. You don't have to deal so much with it. You order a product. It is produced. Yeah, we have to speak about it in such terms, and then you get the delivery, and maybe soon you can do this like with Amazon. If you don't like it, you send it back and order another one. So the moralical disaster is indeed in the Western society what we
and
find
it's
about
even and the babies. Can you imagine that? Lately there were some pictures that the Ukrainian babies are even packed in Ukrainian traditional national clothes.
Oh, I want to vomit.
just to stress that the product is made in Ukraine. So this is the level of collapse of not only Ukrainian statehood, but also, let's say, of the general morality of some Ukrainians who make business on that, and their Western partners. And
you know what is the most disgusting element about this? What I just imagined, the most disgusting element about this is that those who order these babies feel like Western saviors, as if they did something good. That is the most disgusting thing. That they feel morally superior even because they helped someone, and look what we are doing. This is
So this is even, to some extent, I think that it's even worse than the very clear situation of slavery in the past, yes, because in this particular case, no one calls them slaves, yes, but still, the fact is that their real status is status of slaves.
Yes, and we should call it out. We should exactly call it like that. So, unfortunately, we are already at the end of this topic. I am sure we will speak again about it because there are many different types of slavery today, but this is most probably one of the most dystopian and disgusting examples of modern slavery.
Yes, exactly. As well as I thought we should come back to some new ways of interpretation of biopolitics as such, also in our future podcasts.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.